I discuss with the business what they need and what they can get. And this translation between IT and business, I think that's an important role you oftentimes need to make things working and efficient. And therefore, my PhD, I can go into much more detail. It was about like also augmented reality, virtual reality, but knowledge management as such was very, very important and quite interesting as well.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined once again by a familiar face and voice, Peter Schopf. Welcome back, Peter, once again.
Hi, Niall. I'm happy to be back.
Brilliant. No, love to have you back. And today, I mean, people who know, regular listeners will know, we keep this, our podcast sort of very loose in a sense that we cover some of the big topics that Peter's maybe in discussions with clients with, or he's hearing in all the various conversations he's having about the future of IoT. And as we progress further into the new age of Gen AI, agentic AI, and all of those topics. So it's very sort of a loose fireside chat, I would describe it as. But we have got some topics we're going to cover today. But I guess first of all, Peter, since our last chat, is there anything sort of pressing that's come up in these conversations that you want to share with the audience to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different and interesting developments, especially because my main focus is on AI, generative AI, as you pointed out. And that's really exciting with agents, discussing agents. When are they already possible to use or not yet? And I have also a strong opinion about that. And on the other side, I'm now a podcast host myself for at least some time. There is this podcast, IoT Use Cases, and there, because of a pregnancy of the main podcast host, I took over some episodes now, and I'm going to take over the next months. And we have some very in-depth discussions around IoT as well, because obviously IoT use case, it's the focus there in IoT topics. So interesting. And also, of course, how this also relates then at some point in time, because data on the one hand side, and then AI on the other side to contextualize it. And I had another discussion then, the third element basically, and that's my PhD, which I had, is visualization as well. Yeah. So how do you then visualize and interact with all this information that is contextualized by AI? So lots of different and interesting aspects to touch upon. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, fantastic. You've opened the conversation up perfectly. But I think we should start from the start, actually, because you mentioned you've got strong opinions on the use of agents. So I think it's the perfect place to start. So, what is your view, I guess?
Yeah, we've developed this kind of step-by-step model, kind of different levels. And some companies, because of this hype around agents, agentic AI, they jump immediately into the conclusion, we can have these agents and they automate everything. And that's very challenging in a real setting, in a realistic business environment, because of interfaces, because of cultural differences and problems. And so, as you might know and remember from previous conversations, for me, it's very important to not only talk about technology, but also talk about the processes that are impacted then by implementing technology, and talking about people, the human aspect and change management. And very often this is neglected. Yeah, I've seen that in the past. Haven't thought it's possible that it's neglected on that scale and with that frequency, but it's really the case that people very often don't address that. And integrating agents into a culture where there are different systems that have different interfaces, certain cultural settings, it's very challenging. And that's in our model kind of the last stage, which can be achieved at some point in time. The thing is that many name agents kind of already simple assistants, like Microsoft Copilot agents. These are mainly very often very simple AI assistants and not the autonomous agents others are talking about, which will really impact the future. They are so far really in the research and experimentation phase, I would say.
Maybe we should just recap slightly, because I know we did discuss this in the last episode, but about the different stages of the adoption of AI. Just to recap for people who may not have listened before.
No, sure, because I'm very keen about this model. I think it makes a lot of sense, and many, don't know about that. But the first level would be prompting. And you might think, or the listeners, you might think, prompting, that's easy, right? So that's done already. I do that for a couple of years. But it's fascinating how few people do strategic prompting. Organizations would have a huge benefit by strategic prompting, and they're just not doing that on a systematic scale. And what do I mean by that? Well, operative prompting is kind of, you generate an output. You ask the AI to generate a letter, to summarize a meeting, to create the output of a process, kind of an offer for the customer or an answer to their service request or else. That's operative prompting, and it's good and important, but it has also challenges like the reliability of AI. Strategic prompting, on the other hand, I've been talking about that for quite some time, and I was surprised that many people kind of nod and say, "Yeah, that's true," but then it's more difficult to comprehend, it seems. And I've been just discussing with somebody who really asked me, "So please explain it again. What is it?" And to make that clear, I don't know. Do you have this to drill a big board? Do you have that expression in English? Kind of
draw a big board.
Drilling a big board, kind of tackling a big issue, a big problem. Is the kind of, I don't know if there is an expression that fits to that. In German, you would say you would drill a big board, because it's a tough thing to do, and that's kind of a strategic problem that you might have. And AI would not give you the solution. It would help you to structure the process, to discuss what are the aspects, the things that you need to do in order to, at some point in time in the future, come to a solution. So it helps you to create the framework, the structure, the way to get there. And that's strategic prompting. And that is very powerful, because I know that from my own experience in big companies, they're highly paid people sitting together discussing like a reorganization, digitalization initiative, internationalization, some kind of strategic program, topic, anything. And they discuss a lot, and that takes time. And then the outcome is very often not very comprehensive. It neglects lots of important aspects. And step by step, these need to be then developed by maybe different levels of the organization. And it takes a lot of time and insecurity. And this would be just streamlined and sped up and much more comprehensive when supported by AI. And not many companies do that. That's very surprising. So that's the first level. So we're still talking about huge benefits possible on the first stage. And then the second stage would be assistance. So we have a project with E.ON, which is like the big German energy company. Just this week, we released additional features. Very actually kind of simple use case. It's just prompts that work always for the same thing for many people. And this behind a dashboard or an interface which is optimized. This is the second level, assistance all over the place. And also companies are not yet leveraging that. They spend their money more often in very complex topics like agentic workflows, which is a third level, instead of really getting the first two stages right. So depends, of course, on the resources that an organization is willing to spend. But quite often it's really wasted because it's already spent for autonomous agents or agentic workflows where they could have much more benefits with simple assistance or strategic prompting.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about those different stages. Is there sort of key indicators of when, all right, I'm ready to move on to the next stage? It's probably not as simple as that, maybe, but is there like guidance you could give on that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's kind of nearly an automatic development evolution kind of thing, because when you, for example, when you have an operative prompt, let's take this Aeon example. um, we are in the complaints management. And when you are in complaints management and you have prompts that work, that create an answer to the complaint, which is in with the company tone of voice and else, you need to spend a lot of time generating such a prompt, yeah, because it needs to reflect a lot of aspects. But if you have that operative prompt ready, you can then put it into an assistant, and this is suddenly helping a lot of people that don't need to create this operative prompt themselves. As you can, if you study something which you created in the first phase and make it available to everybody else, and then you have this assistant, and then you start thinking, okay, but it now generates the reply, but we can also integrate maybe some additional information from before. We can structure the task delivery and else. So we integrate step by step into other aspects of the workflow. So it's kind of an evolution which you need to decide, okay, how do we then go into that workflow? And at some point in time, if you continually develop that, you might end up with an agentic automation. And that's already the next stage. And if you have clear interfaces and everything is well defined, at some point in time in the future, you might let loose an autonomous agent. But that requires a lot of pre-work to be done. And so it's kind of an evolution topic, not so much a quality stage topic.
Yeah, and so the previous, let's say, stages are sort of building blocks towards agentic AI. I guess is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, because for real agentic AI to be successful, to have an autonomous agent, this agent needs interfaces like the Model Context Protocol, MCP, which is then making knowledge required to solve some problems accessible. And this is all in very early stages. So it's not very wise for companies to start there already.
Now, I believe in our previous conversations, also the summary of the conversation is telling me that we discussed about having there's a high failure rate for sort of agentic AI. Correct me if I'm wrong if it's done that incorrectly, but
Yeah.
and you're sort of mentioning maybe part of it there where people are wanting to jump ahead maybe too soon, getting excited by all
Yeah.
the talk of agentic AI and let's get it implemented and it's going to do amazing stuff. But are there other reasons behind that, Peter? Why they tend to fail at the moment?
I must laugh a little bit because I'm currently having, like in LinkedIn, a small series which I call kind of fake news. And I want to address some headlines I constantly see. And yeah, because as you know, I mean, there's a lot of drumming around AI, and people claim certain things. And one of the things I've seen several times, because it's a study from MIT, some area of MIT. And the headline reads basically 95% of all AI projects fail. And that's a very strong claim. 95% of AI projects fail. And people who always say, like, also in Germany, especially, like, they're very careful. Listen, you see that headline, 95% fail, so we don't even start. It's not yet ready, the technology. But if you look deeper into the study, you can criticize that a lot, because what they did is basically that they look only at AI that is an AI platform that is created within the company, not like things like Copilot or GPT that you use that in your daily life. They're not looking at that, and they looked at kind of shareholders' information of financial statements to analyze that to come up with that result. So there's a lot of criticism you can mention towards that study, and there's another study. From Wharton, and they say 74% have a positive ROI of their respondents, but it's kind of gut feeling reply topic. Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of strange news out there, and if you don't give context, people don't understand. But it's nice headline, it's nice clickbaiting, and therefore, as I said, this fake news series, like for example, also what I heard the other day, that AI is getting dumber step by step because it's trained now by AI data, and thereby it kind of iteratively gets dumber, yeah, and that's just not true. Yeah, it could be in theory. Yeah, there's a study out there which kind of sheds some light on that it could be in theory getting dumber, but it's not really the case. But people claim that, oh no, AI is getting now dumber because of the bad data and else. Yeah, so it's really interesting, and this also. It's not so black and white. There are projects failing because they overextend themselves, and these internal company GPT topics, which many companies have, they just don't pay off. They're just just two steps behind the capabilities that you can get in the market, and those are challenges. Yeah, but still, people are learning, and it's a journey. And I think this view in terms of, hey, I have this one project and it has a positive or negative or ROI, that's just the wrong view. It's a transformation topic.
And I guess all the noise and all the discussion, it's probably marketing people like me that don't help either. But does that make it harder to you, Peter, when you first talk to, let's say, a new client or even an existing client? Right? Does that sort of change expectations or misunderstandings creep in, or how does that sort of affect your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, in any case, it makes it difficult to kind of get through in LinkedIn, for example, in these marketing channels. But in my conversations, it's quite positive, because I use these simple images to make things clear. Yeah, in my also when I give like a keynote or something, and this is quite appreciated. Yeah, because it makes things tangible. Like one example, which got rated the last time I let the people rate which of the impulses and pictures, and I said kind of, I bring a bouquet of flowers, which of the flowers that you picked, kind of the impulses, are the best ones. And the best one rated was actually that I say, you need to treat a generative AI not like a calculator where you put something in and you always expect the same result, but rather like a working student, to conceptualize AI differently, because there are a lot of interesting aspects when you think about an AI like that. Context is king. Yeah, you need to give the AI more context. A working student who you would give a task to, you would take maybe half an hour to explain the context of the organization and why this task is important and else, and what you expect. So all of this for AI is very often people take like a Google impression, like a sentence or something, and expect miracles. But yeah, you need to give it context. Without context, it's not working. And you need to give it examples. You need to iterate. Yeah, when it comes back with the first result, tell it, yeah, that was a good try, but it was not what I expected. Yeah? And so all of these aspects help a lot. And also that each chat that you have is like an own working student, because you build up context within the chat. The AI is not learning except what you put into the chat. And so these kind of considerations, and that helps. Yeah, and it helps in understanding, because many people are not yet there. Yeah, they start from scratch basically, and others are already evolved. And also this picture of the working student evolves, because there's by now a next level basically, that is that if you have kind of mastered that, here I work with AI like a working student, you can then start having your assistants around you. Yeah, that you have different assistants for different tasks assigned. That if you want to create an offer, for example, that you give it to one assistant that has several of your offers in the past and is very quick in creating that. You have another assistant then for marketing and else. Yeah, so you then start building assistants around you that have certain context already integrated in the system prompt, for example. And so, yeah, all of these topics are evolving, and you just in the conversations, you need to see where the people are currently at and where you can lead them at the next level and further next level. Yeah. So, like for example, one of the next levels, I would say not many people are thinking at yet, is kind of the culture of the AI. How do you use an AI in a way that you can influence the culture of your organization? That's kind of a level I would say hardly anybody thinks about. But we have submitted a proposal to the European Union, which goes into that direction a little bit. That was also exciting, I need to say. because it's kind of my company has been the coordinator of this consortium. First time I addressed an EU project using AI to coordinate a consortium of like 11 organizations, 9 of those universities. Quite a feat, I would say. So, and it's interesting to leverage AI like that as well.
That's really interesting. And the educational side, how is it like working with universities, I should say, on topics like this?
Yeah, the discussions are interesting because obviously they have their own curriculum, which is established, and more kind of discussions are how and when and if AI is used to generate homework outcomes, basically, or tests and else, and study how you integrate it into your studies. What I think from a general education perspective is that promptathons, if you've heard about that, is by far the best way of trainings of how you can use AI. Yeah, so promptathons, just to explain it, comes from hackathons. Hackathons are established for decades now, that coders come together, have a challenge, and they really get. This is kind of a competition. Yeah, who addresses the challenge best? And there are pro coders as well as beginners coming together, to address challenges. And the same is for promptathons. You just do it with prompting. You just talk to the AI, and this really hands-on experience overcomes lots and lots of different difficult topics that don't get addressed if you have like this generic AI training kind of thing. Many companies do like these webinars, online webinars thing, click through AI teaching courses. Doesn't really help. So these promptathons, you use challenges from the organization, and this also evolved now. I mean, promptathons, we had done that also a year ago already. Large promptathons for Siemens, for example, with 80 people and different breakouts, and we developed a multiplication program, so kind of an ambassador. It's better called ambassador program, and the participants now brought those learnings into the organization. But now we differentiated that as well, because we realized, well, there are these operative promptathons where you solve operative problems, like we discussed at the beginning. You generate an outcome for an offer, or for your daily office work and environment, or for banking. We have some dedicated promptathons for banking, for example. And then there's strategic promptathons, where you learn strategic prompting and you address strategic problems. So we differentiate now between operative and strategic, and general and specific, because you can also, like when you have a real challenge that needs to be solved, it's not the training, but it's the challenge you want to solve. You can also use a promptathon to solve the challenge, and then it's a specific problem you address. And this I'm very convinced about, and we scale it up currently.
Oh, fantastic. I know in the UK in particular, I think it's been, last couple of years, I guess, Senseye has been introduced in certain universities, like Manchester Metropolitan University actually has started to, have been teaching Senseye in the classroom and things like that. We do, a partnership with Siemens as well. So it's really cool that, things like that being brought into the educational side as well.
Yeah. It will. AI will be in all areas going forward for sure, and it's also interesting. So this typical IoT also discussion: make or buy. Do I buy a solution from external, or do I start making an own AI or IoT solution? It's the same digitalization solution in general. And it's not so easy to be answered, because you can spend a lot of resources creating one, but then you have something in hand which might be differentiating you towards the market, or you can buy one which is then often just money spent, not differentiating. So how do you address that? And for many solutions like customer relationship management, CRM, you just probably use the solutions that that will be integrated in, for example, Salesforce or else. Yeah, they will just integrate AI anyway, and you just use what you get. And then maybe for some aspects you have certain data that is just owned by you. And for those topics, you generate your own AI solutions or own aspects, own assistants that you provide to the market. That's a very interesting discussion. Probably nearly all companies need to have now. Where do they create their own solutions or add-ons to their solutions, and where do they buy something?
Yeah, I mean, build versus buy has always been a debate in the software world. But I guess when things become easier to develop yourself internally, vibe coding, even if you want to call it that as well. But when things become quicker to spin up, it does change the conversation somewhat, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had this conversation around low code quite a while with citizen developers and else, but it's not so easy. I've also did like a rapid developer certificate with Mendix, which is one of the low code platforms. Still was good training, but I never then really leveraged it because citizen developership has been still difficult. And with vibe coding, it starts to get easier. With especially like when you think about the interface and the functionalities that you want to have, and not describing that in we call it Lastenheft, kind of a big requirements list, but rather kind of in a way that you generate a POC, which is then kind of giving the direction to what will be developed. So this definitely helps, so for sure.
I realised we've had such an in-depth conversation. Time's flying by. And we were going to cover a couple more topics. I don't want to rush through them, but what I did want to cover before we finish is the podcast you mentioned at the beginning. So obviously you've been, regular listeners will know you're a regular on trend detection, and really look forward to our conversations. But what's this sort of new podcast you're now involved with, Peter?
Yes, it's called IoT use cases. And the cool thing is that really the companies that go there, they present one use case, or at least one use case, or their solution to specific problems. And that makes it very tangible. So this is what I like. I mean, also in my company, I do consulting and training, but also implementation. Why? Because by implementing, you learn a lot, which you then can bring back to consulting and training, obviously. And this is really cool. So the first recordings we did also was, for example, with Siemens and Salzgitter. Yeah, we talked about 5G in a steel plant environment, which is quite exciting. Yeah, that it's completely different environment. They're very hot and dusty, and so kind of rugged you need to be in order to be successful there, and to have a private 5G network. Now, how does this relate to WLAN, to wireless LAN, and Ethernet and bus and else? When do you use what kind of communication system? That's an interesting part. Or we talked, for example, with double slash, which is a substitute of ZF Friedrichshafen, and they have kind of this holistic approach from connect to make smart to monetize, which I like as a conceptual differentiation between all the connectivity that you need to do, and the protocols and the transfer of data, which might be long distance and might be kind of with many different systems that need to generate and submit their data. Make smart is this contextualization, which I like a lot. And that's not always easy, like in an industrial environment, to train your own AI models, for example, for prediction. You need a lot of fault data, like of things that go wrong, in order to train your model on that normally. And when you have systems that are very reliable, and you have a lot of good data, you don't have the bad data, but you need the bad data for the training. And so this very often delays projects, AI projects, for example, for prediction in the industry. But also for me, just to highlight that it's always important to differentiate between the classical AI, where you train your own model with your own data, and generative AI, where you can basically leverage the whole internet knowledge just by using such a model. Just to make that clear, industrial AI is very often this you train your own model on data for prediction. And then also monetize, kind of to finalize this discussion, this holistic approach. How do you monetize? And lots of different and interesting discussions. I like it a lot because I have been developing a little bit more into the organizational development side. I've been in leadership roles at Siemens, and so organizational development is actually more close to me what I did than real factory hard work. Like I've visited factories, but that's about it. But now with IoT use case, I come back a little bit, at least discussing those topics, which I was always very keen about. And still, while my focus will remain with organizational development and generative AI.
Fantastic. So we'll certainly link to that in the show notes as well, so people can check that out as well. And I guess just finally as well, Peter, so you mentioned as well your PhD, and maybe we could dive into that in our next discussion, but sort of where are you at the moment? And maybe a little bit of background again for listeners who may not recall what is focused on.
Yeah, my PhD finally this year I finalized it. Yeah, so I'm very happy about that. I started it while I was with Siemens, while I had a full-time job, and I actually at that time supported also a startup. And I had this innovation project which I wrote my PhD about, and so I had like these 4 items which I juggled, and that was quite a tough time, I need to say. So I'm very happy that this year I could finalize my PhD in information system. So it's kind of this intersection between business and IT, and I see that this has a lot of value because, for example, in my Aeon project, I have a startup. I use like another company. I subcontracted them and I tell them basically what to do and what to develop. And Aeon on the other side, I discuss with the business what they need and what they can get. And this translation between IT and business, I think that's an important role you oftentimes need to make things working and efficient. And therefore, my PhD, I can go into much more detail. It was about like also augmented reality, virtual reality, but knowledge management as such was very, very important and quite interesting as well.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on completing it. I know from various people I know have done PhDs how much work and of course work that goes into them. So yeah, very well done.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks.
Fantastic. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion. Once again, thank you, Peter, for another really interesting discussion. We often, like I said at the beginning, often don't know where these conversations are going to lead. But again, I think it was down another interesting path, both for me and for everyone listening as well, I'm sure. But yeah, for today, thank you, Peter, for your time. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening to this episode. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.